set. They weren't necessarily looking super comfortable, but okay, Ai's going to be the third pick here, and I would say so far is the standout map of this tournament in terms of how people have approached it. Sours, what do you make of this pick?
So Ivashara is kind of an interesting pick, but at the same time, a little bit expected. This is the losers round of 4, the first round of the lower bracket map. So this is a map, of course, that this team is going to be very practiced on. It's something that we did talk about earlier. There are new affixes in the Ivashara this time around. Say goodbye to the explosive orbs. We are now dealing with skittish, necrotic, tyrannical, and Ivashara. And so we talked about how that last boss, Tyrannical, it may only be a 23, but it's very scary in here.
Speaking of scary, this is going to be the first time we're actually seeing skittish in this tournament. Obviously, that's new to the Global LAN Finals. Ted, what's it like being skittish?
Are you asking about the game or me myself?
We're going to go with the game for the purposes of, I think, this broadcast being rated PG.
I mean, since we have, of course, this relatively new affix, at least to the MDI world for those at home, what this means, it won't be an easily visually detectable affix, but what it does is it reduces the overall threat that the tank produces on the on anything in this dungeon, really. So a lot of the big pulls that you might see teams do where the tank kind of gets a bit of aggro, starts to run away, could provide a bit of complexity, if you will, or danger perhaps for the rest of the team as they kind of get some more threat with their damage and on the mobs. Necrotic, of course, Jack, nobody's any stranger to, especially the healer and tank, as increasing stacks will decrease the amount of healing and absorb that the tank can get on them by 3% per stack. So, of course, when you reach that 34 stacks, you are literally unhealable.
Yeah, but at this point, you are seeing OMEGASNIPED pulling everything into Parjesh here. They are just getting that first pack that is kind of just guarding Parjesh very closely here, getting it all in. And like you said, having to deal with Necrotic, especially when you're pulling extra mobs into the boss, you know, is going to add so many extra hazards for them to deal with to be able to actually get through. So they're popping Bloodlust here, and it's very important to be able to make sure they're able to maximize as much damage as Zongo can, while still making sure that Hadron is going to be able to drop his stacks cleanly and efficiently.
So SKYLINE.D opting to kill the trash prior to engaging Warlord Parjesh, but we do see that Bloodlust come up on their side as well, as Team OMEGASNIPED on the right side is just finishing up with theirs. 15 seconds left on the timer for that. The trash getting cleaned up now. Unlike the two maps that we saw before this, there is no more bolstering, meaning that they can freely kill the mobs as quickly as they want to cut out some of that danger. Skittish, as long as the tank is providing a ton of damage, will be able to hold aggro onto them. As we do know, of course, for just those at home, threat is just damage done by the tank times a multiplier, so the easy way to overcome the Skittish affix is to just play more offensively and gear more offensively as the tank.
Yeah, at this point you are seeing, you know, 50% was the mark where Bloodlust had faded away for OMEGASNIPED here. As you're seeing, you know, SKYLINE.D just a little bit behind because they were not actually pulling all those extra mobs into the boss. They weren't actually getting all that extra cleave damage that OMEGASNIPED was actually able to take advantage of. So while there is a little bit of disparity in terms of trash percentage here, it looks like OMEGASNIPED is really coming out strong in this dungeon.
No, we did see typically from the EU and NA teams is that after Parjesh falls for Team OMEGASNIPED here, they do kind of a big pull with all the Naga surrounding the area. Some teams actually have quite some trouble with that, so we'll have to see how they pull it off, especially with the Necrotic. Now, it's not too bad, the Necrotic, the tank can just run away to reset the stacks, as long as they provide enough threat, especially under this skittish circumstance that they have to deal with. Parjesh now down to 16% after that huge DFA for Team OMEGASNIPED. Should be falling quickly as they deal with the two mobs on the side, wanting to make sure, of course, that you leave one of the two mobs alive, usually the Crest Rider, so that they can eat the spear to the face and not have one of the players deal with it, and of course not having to use that bot for no reason in this tyrannical setting.
And they do a very good job making sure that they're able to kind of get away from the rest of those mobs here. You do still have to watch out for the dot that went out just before the boss had actually ended up dying here. So you are going to see a couple extra heals going out onto Zyronic, making sure that he's going to be topped off before they start moving on to the next trash packs here. We are going to be seeing an interesting route coming out as they're going to be going actually to the left side rather than moving on into the direction of Lady Haycoil.
Yeah, I haven't seen this route, honestly, since early beta and Legion, when most teams would just kind of go this way. There's a lot of danger in the kind of cave that they're going to on the side. There's one of the giants that they have to deal with, which teams usually kind of opt to skip at all costs. We are in that tyrannical setting, so the trash is not really as dangerous, so not too surprising to see some kind of new strats and pulls. We'll have to see how this works out for Team OMEGASNIPED. SKYLINE.D has now downed Parjesh and will re-stealth past that group of three that they jumped past earlier to engage Parjesh, and they're going down more of a traditional route, moving over to the left side of the instance.
It's got to be a very good part of, you know, of extra confidence that we're seeing out of the side of OMEGASNIPED, where, you know, yes, this was not their pick, but they already have some very interesting strategies coming up that we have not actually seen in the MDI yet before.
And of course, as we pay attention, we do have Skittish here, and we do see that the logo representing Skittish down in the bottom has disappeared, as much of the mobs do with their Skittish and their threat. Zyronic does go down here, though, so a bit of damage damage and threat coming out to them. Unhealable amount of stacks on Hadron as he will go down too. It looks like this is a purposeful wipe, I would assume, here on the side as they kind of run through, and we do see that failure detection pylon going down. So indeed, this was intended. They save that extra death from Zongo, who can just safely stealth through everything, saving the 5 seconds. Will res everybody up safely on the other side of the dungeon, or maybe they won't actually. It looks like they kind of failed with the failure detection pylon, so obviously the pylon was not working properly. So we're going to have to see what their plan B here is, if they're just going to kind of end up doing it again, but that is going to cost them a bunch of time, and it's just allowing Skyline.D with this more traditional route on the left side of the screen, as we see it puffed up here on the main monitor, getting ready to deal with those 2 Arcanists, which will spawn the Lady Hate Coil.
And at this point, they are just making sure they're able to neutralize all these mobs. You are seeing, like you said, that kind of traditional pull as they're pulling all the Gilbins that they can to make sure they're bringing them back again into the Arcanist when they're going to be able to get everything neutralized in together. And that's the thing you've always been able to see. And, one of the most fun parts of Ivashar, when you're able to get these very, very large trash pulls in, have everybody neutralize them as rapidly as possible here. But it's also the skittish and also the extra danger there. So you might actually see, the tank start getting some distance here when all the mobs are breaking out of their Chaos Nova here, but also having to watch out for on the side of just the triple melee composition here. Any of the mobs are going to be, just dropping their threat and just start trying to whack the melee here. So really good control on the side of Skyline.
So a bit more trouble coming out of Team OMEGASNIPED on the right side as Oronic does go down. They're dealing with some of the trash in that cave right now, including that Giant, which does quite a bit of damage AoE, but also the stun during all the trash being surrounded. So a bit of danger towards the tank there. Skyline.D doing an excellent job. Now both teams have an advantage to kind of counter this skittish that we didn't mention yet, Jack, in the Rogues. The Rogues will provide that Tricks of the Trade, which redirects all of their threat for 30 seconds, if I'm not mistaken, onto the tank, meaning that some of these big pulls, especially at the start, will be a lot easier for the tank, and they're kind of able to start kiting a bit earlier should it be too dangerous, like with that Mass Gilbin pull that we just saw.
Yeah, it really shows just how well they're able to actually, control all the trash and be able to make sure that they're not going to be able to get any extra percentages here. Also very nice, that you don't have to deal with any of the fortified Hydras here, which can just deal tons and tons of damage, especially as you're unable to actually heal yourself as the necrotic stacks start going up. But you're seeing on the side of Mayu here, getting very good positioning to start face pulling a lot of the other trash. That way he's able to stay mounted up here, grabbing everything, bringing it all in together there. That way, the second that they're done with the Hydra, they don't actually have to move to be able to encounter any other mobs. They're just simply able to get on top of the next set and start progressing further and getting ready for Lady Hate Coil.
Yeah, just really excellent, clean play here from them. Excellent done by Maya, and just shows as well the strength of that Blood DK being able to handle themselves with the support of the team, getting ready to peel any of the trash that would kind of not allow those necrotic sets to necrotic stacks, to reset. Team OMEGASNIPED dealing with that double giant pull right before King Deepbeard. One of the more dangerous pulls that we often see teams just skip entirely with the boat skip, or either pulling to the side and everybody runs through. So interesting to see them deal with it. I guess they're feeling more confident in this tyrannical setting, but we do see another cheat death proc for Zongo there. Luckily no death on the board, but he won't have that security later. Skyline.D, Miu's just running circles around all of these crabs, but they didn't end up going for Lady Hate Coil. Rather, they are working their way towards Serpentrix, who of course was knighted in England recently.
Is that so? Yeah, at this point, you have to look at when you're going to be using your Bloodlust, and ideally in a tyrannical format, you want to make sure that you're going to be able to have Bloodlust available for, of course, Lady Hate Coil. So at this point, you're able to kind of weigh your options, whether you want to go right to Serpentrix here or, without using Bloodlust, or if you want to be able to clear as much trash and just get all of your trash percentage until Bloodlust comes back, and then engage with Lady Hate Coil here. So it'll be interesting to see, how long they're going to be able to take with the rest of this trash, because they have mopped up almost all of the board here that they're going to really need. So at this point, you are seeing Evil going down. How much do they actually need to be, and how long is it really going to take for them to take down Serpentrix before they move on to Hate Coil?
Serpentrix, indeed. A team of OMEGASNIPED working on King Deepbeard on the right side of the screen, so very opposite pathing from these two teams right now. The more unconventional route going definitely in the way of Team OMEGASNIPED. Not something we see teams do, but this tournament, this weekend here, so we're going to see a lot of this creativity flair from the groups as they've tried and practiced to death a lot of these strategies. So it should be in their wheelhouse here. It could be any team's game right now, but certainly looking a bit more advantageous for Skyline.D as they're already at 85% of trash. So they're probably just going to bang out these two bosses and get ready to move upstairs to Deepbeard with that boat skip, Jack.
Yeah, at this point, about halfway through, or almost halfway through King Deepbeard as Skyline.D is engaging with Serpentrix here. But like you said, the trash percentage makes a world of difference as we're going on to this. So you would be expecting OMEGASNIPED to just be taking some very large risks here, because at this point, you know, there is not really much of a death disparity going on. So at this point, it's going to be a lot on how well they're going to be able to pull. Oh, sorry, there's a bit more of a death disparity, but it's going to be a lot on how they're going to be able to pull the trash quickly and efficiently.
Right, you are. And I would say in terms of efficiency, there's definitely a bit of efficiency lost with those two giants in favor of SKYLINE.D that Team OMEGASNIPED decided to pull. Now, let's talk a bit about these bosses real quick before they disappear forever from our monitors. King Deepbeard on the right side, of course, will do that Quake on the team, which will kind of spawn an area under the team, under each player. And you want to make sure you move out of that fissure, because 5 seconds later, it will pulse for an immense amount of damage. So you want to make sure that you're kind of baiting it to save some of the real estate in the area. Players will also have those absorb bubbles cast on them. And if you don't take enough damage to break the bubble, it will hit the entire ult for the remaining amount of absorb on the bubble. Nightmare as usual, Jack. Otherwise, there's just a frontal on the tank, a frontal area that they can easily move out of, no problem there. And Serpentrix has his own nightly duties as well with his abilities, Jack, if you want to run through those.
Yeah, that's right. And you're seeing, you know, a lot of the puddles that are being dropped onto the different players here. It's very important to make sure that they're able to just either slowly kite them out, or even if you want to just stand in that same spot, they don't actually ramp up in terms of damage here. So if you're able to just slowly get everything pretty well stacked up together, reduce any of the area effect that they really have to worry about here, makes it a lot easier, especially when we're in melee competition, for everybody to get around and actually reduce the damage going out. There will also be 2 transition phases as we're entering the second one of those, where Serpentrix will spawn, you know, the Arcane and the Blazing Hydra heads. You will have to, of course, interrupt the Enrage that's going out by Serpentrix, but then, of course, killing each of the heads on the side, keeping them stunned or interrupted to reduce the damage going out on the group, and then going back into Serpentrix there.
Well, you know what they say, Jack, 3 heads are better than 1. The Arcane one being of particular danger to the team, as it will cast Arcane Blast on a member, and every successful cast will increase its damage done, eventually one-shotting one of the members. So you want to make sure to kick, interrupt, whatever you need to do to it, silence it, to just keep it locked down. The teams have killed the 2 remaining heads. The team, rather, has to kill the 2 remaining heads for SKYLINE.D, and Serpentrix will be soon falling. Keep in mind, though, for those at home, they do have to double back and go back to Lady Haycoil. Jack, as you well pointed out earlier, their Bloodlust is just about to come off cooldown, almost perfectly, quite frankly, as they will move over and use it on Lady Haycoil, which in this tyrannical setting, I would say is one of the scarier bosses in here with that Focused Lightning.
Yeah, at that point, especially in the tyrannical, like you said, you know, you really have to be rotating through defenses at around 23, making sure that, you know, everyone has the tools that they need to be able to survive, maybe playing a little bit more defensive here to be able to have some classes using Pride Heads if they really need it. But ideally, if you're able to have everybody, you know, and as offensive gear as possible, that's going to be the ideal. But OMEGASNIPED has so much that they need to be able to catch up on here. As Serpentrix goes down, they're at 90% in terms of trash percentage, and then OMEGASNIPED is not even halfway there.
Team OMEGASNIPED still dealing with a quite big pull here right now. Keep an eye on him, still on the necrotic setting, and Hadrian does not have that perk available, as he just kind of runs around making sure to dodge all of these lightning areas, making sure to reset his stacks as well. Now, the Hydras themselves don't move as quickly as some of the other mobs, but they can't be slowed by a lot of the traditional means, so you want to make sure you build a really good distance between yourself and them to reset your stacks if he does not have that anti-magic shell available to him on a 1-minute cooldown. Could be using the Legendary Cloak, which extends the duration of that AMS to 10 seconds, perfectly overlaying the necrotic stacks. Not sure if he's wearing that right now, but it's possible that he will, especially for this pull, just swapping it out quickly. SKYLINE.D has now pulled Lady Haycoil on the left side, the big screen here, and as we can see, indeed did use their Bloodlust.
Yeah, at that point, you know, it's very important to make sure that you're watching out for the 2 basic big mechanics. You just saw the Focused Lightning going out there, which you should stand away from the sandbars. That way you're not going to be able to destroy those. Then in just a second, you're going to be able to have, you know, the other AoE that's going to be, you know, electrifying all the water around, where you're having the Static Nova, and you want to make sure that everybody's standing on those sandbars to avoid any of the extra lightning, and which will also stun you. So very important to make sure you're kind of keeping all these adds alive as long as possible, just so that MGT is going to be able to keep up that damage. But again, you do have to still worry about the necrotic stacks here.
And that's exactly what I want to mention, Jack. And I also wanted to mention that you want to stay away from other players with that Focused Lightning, as you've taught me, unfortunately, a few times, that it will clip other people around you. But that's just it. The necrotic here is kind of a double-edged sword. They want to get that extra single target damage out of leaving those globules alive, especially in favor of the rogue. Well, not in favor of everyone almost, but rogue especially, getting a lot of those combo points from that AoE onto the adds. But, you know, the double-edged sword here is that there will be a lot of necrotic stacks on the tank, and you can see really well there the previous Static Nova before this. I like what they're doing again right here, is they put that Ring of Peace down, allowing the adds, or disallowing the adds, to have access to the tank during that Static Nova when they're locked to an island, and decreasing the amount of necrotic stacks. So really clever play here by SKYLINE.D.
Yeah, I really like the extra control, and they even rotated through Typhoon as well to make sure that when they didn't quite have Ring of Peace available to them, or they didn't have the Chaos Nova available to them to actually rotate through it, they had something to kind of keep the distance, as Rain was doing a great job being able to drop his necrotic stacks, and they're just absolutely melting this boss here, as Serpentrix is only at 50% here for Team OMEGASNIPED.
Yeah, they still have to deal with his second phase. Of course, some teams do opt to skip the 2 heads in the second phase and just try to burn the boss down from 33. A bit more dangerous to do in this tyrannical setting, but Lady Hatecoil going down to 2% now, about to fall here for SKYLINE.D. 10% trash left on the board for them. I believe you need a 92% though before killing the last 4 mobs, which will give you access to Wrath of Ashar. So they do have a bit more damage to do here, probably 1 or 2 mobs left. They have marked a skull on that crab up ahead. Not sure if they're planning on dealing with it, after which we will see them do the traditional, or what has become traditional, boat skip leading up to King Deepbeard.
Yeah, at this point, you know, they really are putting themselves closer to the boat, making sure they're going to be able to deal with that quickly, get Deepbeard down. They might opt to actually pull maybe one of the seagulls that's up there, or maybe one of the snails to be able to get a little bit extra cleave damage off onto the boss there. We'll have to see, but with the snail and the triple melee composition, it actually can be quite problematic, having to actually have the frontal AoE going out for it, so it'll be interesting to see what they do here. Also, a big point to watch out for is that OMEGASNIPED is not going to have Bloodlust available to be able to take on Hatecoil, so that fight will last quite a bit longer, and they will have to actually have a lot more attrition healing going out into the fight.
Yeah, it'll be quite dangerous as SKYLINE.D just does now engage King Deepbeard here. They still have 90% on the board, so they will have to kill 1 more mob. Now, it will be pretty easy for them to kind of pull something with the remaining 4 mobs, or if I'm not mistaken, I saw the snail on the side of the room there aggroed. Not sure who's going to actually end up handling that, or if it was a purposeful aggro nonetheless. They start chewing through King Deepbeard's health here, down to 83% already, as Serpentrix is going down for Team OMEGASNIPED on the right side of the screen. And as you said, they will make their way over to Lady Hatecoil. Now, the problem is they're still lacking 36% trash, or minus the 8, let's say 28% that they still need to make up, quickness, that they still need to make up for the rest of the dungeon before they even try to engage the final 4 mobs.
Yeah, and at this point you're seeing, what I also want to point out is the great positioning on the side of SKYLINE.D here, because you will have the quaking that goes out regularly and puts down that extra zone that will then have an aftershock here. You want to be able to stack up all those quakings on top of each other and then moving away before the aftershock ends up hitting here, because all those aftershocks, if you stack 3 quakings onto the same spot, you're going to have 3 aftershocks going out at once here. So when you're having such a heavy emphasis on melee heavy compositions, you're going to see, that almost a full compass around the boss of their specific quaking areas and trying to make sure everyone's staying in the same spot as much as possible here.
Yeah, they want to play it as safe as possible, and they're doing really well right now. I mean, there's a lot of area to this map that they can kind of cover if needed, but you don't have to use it if they don't need to, and it does create some problems as the tank's running away. Sometimes a frontal comes up, as we can see through that circle right now on Reigns, moves well out of it and back in onto his quaking spot. Team OMEGASNIPED with a big pull, getting some of those Arcanists down. Keep in mind, they haven't even spawned the potential to get to Lady Hatecoil yet. You do have to kill 2 of those Arcanists on the side, as we saw one of them go down now, and they're kind of backpedaling towards where most teams end up after Parjesh, over on the Arcanist and Snail area right now.
And right here you're seeing, I really like out of Mayu where he's actually holding aggro onto the Snail and kind of dragging it a little bit away from melee constantly, while still leaving it dotted up, while still contributing some damage into it, and ideally trying to keep it in range of maybe like the I-beam out of Fang or just any of the extra cleave damage that goes out. So it keeps it out of melee, it keeps it from dying immediately, but it also does an excellent job, at the expense of more positioning, more movement on the side of Mayu, to be able to make sure that that contribution is going out there. So I really like the play there.
And it's not too hard to move it around as it does move at snail's pace, just making sure it keeps around the boss for that cleave we just saw, as you mentioned earlier, that I-beam clipping the edge of the snail as well. So really well done by them. I'm loving this out of SKYLINE.D. I mean, the amount of coordination that they have between healer, tank, and group right now. The healer's running off, doing his own thing, trusting the rest of the group to stay alive, the tank to keep themselves alive, putting a hot or 2, a heal over time or 2 on the tank in the meantime, and just getting everything needed to go is just so clean here.
Yeah, I love seeing actually the snail was about to frontal the entire melee group there, because they actually had to coalesce and stack together after the quaking went out. But he did a great job actually hitting the Typhoon, get the grip in, get the asphyxiate onto the snail there to make sure they're able to shut it down right as the boss goes down, and they're at perfect trash percentage.
I mean, that would be rather slimy if it did go off, but they do move over, just like yourself, so they do move over back to the casters leading up to the boss. Now, you can combine these together. The issue here is that there's a big space between these sorceresses here as they start to do just that. They are groupable, they are displaceable, of course, but there's a lot of interrupts that need to go out. We're not in a fortified setting, so should one of their casts get off, one of the lightning casts, the blast get off on one of the targets here, probably not an instant death, but they are kind of prepping them, and I like to see this slowly moving them towards the next mob and then pulling right away.
Yeah, you're seeing Hadrian actually going down here. They pulled all these extra mobs into the boss, and it looks like it was just it was a move that they just had to make, where they had to catch up onto trash percentage here, so they actually had to almost completely sacrifice Hadrian in order to do it, where if they were confident enough to be able to get all of those mobs down, they were able to actually have Hadrian go down during a static Nova, during a cast from the boss, get him quickly rezzed, get aggro back onto the boss, pick up the extra globules, which don't really deal too much melee damage, and then being able to kind of recover that pull. So it was a very risky move, but they executed it fairly well.
And they have to do it. They know where the other team's at this point. You know, they do have access to a monitor with the stream, if I'm not mistaken, like we do, so they can see that they're behind at this point. And not only do they have just this surmounting lead that they have to catch up on with SKYLINE.D, but we keep not talking about the fact that there's 25 seconds on the board in terms of deaths as well. So they had to do this. They had the battle reses available, as you said, Jack, and they just had to go for it. Put them in a more advantageous position, I would say, but they still have 57% on Lady Haycoil, while SKYLINE.D is working on their last Enchantress before having access to the Wrath of Ashara, the final boss of the dungeon.
Yep, right here, and you're seeing, you know, the last boss going down for them as OMEGASNIPED is just at 50%. And at this point, you do kind of have to hope for just the worst on the side of SKYLINE.D for OMEGASNIPED to be able to get back into this game here. And the 6 deaths, though, was just really killing them there. And a lot of it was kind of on the fact that their failure detection pylon just failed them. Where, you know, they were able to get the res out onto, of course, fired up. He'd be able to get everybody else up. He'd be able to start getting the group back into position here. But the fact that they didn't have their Shroud of Concealment from the Rogue, they weren't able to, you know, again, skip past that larger giant mob. It actually just messed all of their trash percentages up. They had to be able to take so much extra time to be able to get back into the game there. It really was such a risky play and taking a unique route, but it really just ended up biting them at the end of it.
I mean, I'm sure it's something that they've well practiced and it just didn't work out for them. But SKYLINE.D looking primed to take this series soon. Wrath of Ashara, of course, does start at 20%, but it does have the equivalent amount of raw HP to some of the other bosses in these dungeons. Important to note on this boss, there is a huge tank frontal, a huge area of denial that the tank, and of course anybody else, will have to move out of. There's also, Jack, that split damage that will go down on one player doing split physical damage. Now, you can immune it or try to CD through it, but in this tyrannical setting, it hits quite hard. So you want to make sure not only to have everybody soaking it together, but definitely to get some CDs out.
Yeah, at this point, you also have to look at how worth it's going to be and how dangerous it's going to be for the entire group to be able to actually take it. You were seeing Fang, for example, just immuning it at the start. You are going to see him running all the way out again to be able to take care of that himself here. So it'll be very interesting to see as you're seeing the Netherwalk going out. He's able to immune it. Reigns does actually have his Purgatory proc. He's just trying to drop his stacks here very quickly. When you're able to mix through things like Cheat Death or any of the extra CCs, or sorry, any of the extra immunities like Netherwalk here, it's amazing to be able to work off of. But if you also have the battle res left available to you, in many cases it's actually a lot safer to be able to just battle res somebody than have everybody stack up and soak.
And we had kind of a wipe there with a failure detection pylon coming out of Team OMEGASNIPED, just making sure everybody is available and not having to run back. But that's extra deaths on the board that they don't need right now, and they still have to deal with those Enchantresses, whilst Wrath of Ashara has already hit and gone beyond the halfway point for SKYLINE.D, doing well to kind of circle around the boss, as the more time you spend in one area, the more tornadoes will spawn there, and of course those frost waves on the side. Eepel does go down, but they have 2 battle reses available to them, and Bloodlust coming up in 2 seconds. Bit of extra damage coming up for the team in just a moment as we see that Bloodlust icon light up immediately, and they're going to try and take this home.
Yeah, at this point, that they just want to make sure that instead of having everybody soak, they just use a sacrifice, and they just got their res out onto them. And like I said, yeah, Bloodlust available, 5% left onto Wrath of Ashara here, as OMEGASNIPED's just trying to do whatever they can to keep getting back into this game here, because at this point, any of the extra AoE damage going out is going to have to be immune or just have to be sacrificed here at this point. So they have almost a full Bloodlust duration before they actually had Fang going down there. They're getting the res off almost immediately here. There's a couple seconds left onto Bloodlust, and they're just burning the rest of the boss.
It was a purposeful death there, of course, with the debuff, wanting to make sure that it just doesn't threaten the team very much. Wrath of Ashara down to 3, and in a moment 2%, which is what goes below 3, Jack, if you didn't know.
Really?
But we'll be finishing this boss up in just a moment, in what honestly has been just another, I would say, back to typically dominant performance, at least a very clean performance that we've seen from SKYLINE.D in their regional. So we have seen that they're human, but certainly only for a moment here as they wrap it up, and Wrath of Ashara will be going down, and SKYLINE.D will be taking this 2-1.
Yeah, Wrath going down there. SKYLINE.D making good on kind of that excellent regional performance, and we were questioning China is oftentimes just a difficult